Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Lilith. We're off to a very bad start here just because I did get hit 2 times in the very first room. That's quite unfortunate, but with a lot of characters, what you usually do when you have a large heap of enemies, you rely on the tears and the knockbacks from those tears to control those enemies and then to kind of make an opening for yourself so you can dodge a bit easier. But with Lilith that's kind of impossible, or I would say very hard in some situations, just because you have your damage source offset, you can't really never know where that exactly will hit, and most of the time where you're shooting at enemies, you don't hit them dead center on, but you usually hit them from the side, at least a little bit, which creates this situation where you're not really knocking the enemies back, you're just knocking them to the side. And sometimes what can happen, especially if there's a lot of enemies in the same room, they can surround you very easily, and just via that you can take a lot of damage. What happened to me one time is when I duplicated my consumables, I had 2 of them at once, and the other incubus actually, when I was shooting at the enemy straight on, it actually pushed the enemy into me. So that was quite unfortunate. Maybe without the footage you don't really have the mental picture, but what I was trying to say is that even sometimes when you shoot at the enemies you can accidentally knock them into yourself, and for Lilith that's usually quite a bad deal. Because this run does go to Mega Satan, we're kind of on the lookout for a lot of things here. Because usually with runs that just go to like, any other, I would say most other goals ends, you're not really that pressured for strength, just because a lot of the bosses aren't that difficult. Sure, you know, beating Harsh maybe it's hard, but he has a lot of predictable patterns. But with Mega Satan, I think unless you're very strong, he can be quite a burden to actually overcome. In a lot of situations, you just end up in this spot where he just spawns a ton of enemies you kind of have to deal with, and unless your run is really strong, it's very hard to deal with that, and by just virtue of that fact, you usually take a lot of damage. So I would say that on Mega Satan dailies, it's much more important for you to actually explore properly and maximize your chances of getting some really good items and maybe getting the devil deals, just because I think those will make you just naturally stronger and then actually be able to tackle on top of everything. If you wonder maybe why I wouldn't employ this strategy on any other daily, like I said before, beating the lamp for example isn't as difficult, and in some situations you kind of have to make sacrifices for speed in hopes of maybe getting a bit stronger. I would say that in some situations it's better to beat boss rush just for a chance to get yourself much stronger. Than if you feel like you can't really beat boss rush and Harsh at the same time, it's maybe a better idea to skip boss rush, just because obviously Harsh does give you more points, but in some situations it's also a good idea to skip boss rush intentionally, even though maybe you could make it, just for a chance to make yourself stronger, then to kind of take less damage on those later floors, and especially against Mega Satan, just because like I said, he's kind of a big hurdle to overcome at the end. But with that said, thankfully we don't really have to worry about that. It was kind of a slow run up until a certain point, but thankfully when we got Brimstone, things kind of turned for us. And with the Brimstone and Incubus, you kind of get a little Brimstone that's just much more potent, just because he does synergize with all of the tier effects you have. And one of the best synergies in the game, at least in the best looking synergy, is probably Tiny Planet along with Brimstone. It creates this arcing beam that goes around you and then shoots right in front of you. And the great thing about it is this, you can essentially use it like Maw of the Void, so not only can you use it on range, but you can also use this particular tear pattern or maybe Brimstone pattern to kill enemies which are near you. So that's very useful in some situations, just because as soon as you enter the room you kind of have to charge your Brimstone up, and when it's charging up you really can't control and shoot all around you, you can only shoot in one direction. But because you have that circle around you, that means you can essentially deal with enemies that would otherwise pose danger to you. So it's kind of, I would say, an extra layer of protection on top of what you already have just by having so much damage. That kind of just makes this item combination a really great one. Besides that, you can see that this run was just kind of bonkers in the sense that we got a lot of good items. And you know, I would say whenever, how do you know if you have a good Lilith run? And that's always when you leave Mom's box behind to pick up another item. In this case, obviously, Teleport 2.0 or the Golden Teleporter is one of the items that's just amazing for dailies, because it does essentially allow you to explore every single room, and just because of the damage we have, we're really not pressed for time. I would say that maybe the Golden Teleporter is only not useful in extreme situations where maybe you don't have enough time to explore, but even in those situations, I think you can make an argument for this. But of course, when we enter boss rush at 17 minutes, I think it's safe to say that we will have enough time to explore all of the other floors and the rooms that we'll actually encounter. It's maybe the only complaint I would have at this point is that having the box of friends for boss rush would be incredibly useful, just because having so many familiars does increase your chances of actually hitting more enemies and just outputting more damage, but even more so for the sacks, because with duplication of the Box of Friends we also get another sack, and because we have the Sack of Sacks, probably one of the best sacks you can have, and I said sacks a bit too many times for me to be comfortable with, but essentially because we have the Sack of Sacks, with having multiple amounts of them, that means that if you double them like 5 times, or just add it on top of it, that means that we would get 6 sacks at every time there would be a payout, so obviously that would be quite a significant score boost. The only problem I had is that I would have probably done that and use it in boss rush, just couldn't find the teleport card, or maybe I found it but I just maybe missed it, maybe I didn't pick it up, because then what I would have done is go to the boss rush, just get a lot of sacks via that way, teleported out, then picked up the golden teleporter, and then I would start spamming the golden teleporter to get to the secret rooms, to the arrow rooms and things like that, and just kind of got a lot of points that way. But besides that, it was quite an interesting experience. Still, just having a way out of boss rush, I think it's always a good idea. And definitely, if you can't really afford it with a card, the golden teleporter is something that you kind of have to fall back on, I think. And double teleporter, not double, but the golden teleporter is also good in that situation, because it not only does allow you to get just a bunch more of exploration bonus, it also allows you to get out of those hairy situations. Like you can enter a curse room and teleport out without taking another hit of damage, or in the case of flight, like we can enter a curse room and then we just teleport out without taking any single hits of damage, so essentially this makes curse rooms free. But also, like I said before, it is useful for boss rush because you can essentially do it and then teleport out to explore the rest of the floor, and that's usually beneficial, because if you have a chance of doing that, I would say that it's almost always good to do that, because in boss rush you get items which inadvertently make you stronger, and just because you're stronger when you teleport out, it's much easier to explore the rest of the floor, just because you deal with it just naturally higher, because your DPS is obviously higher, or maybe you gain speed, or maybe you get other items which just kind of help you with how fast you clear those particular rooms. Besides that, we also had another interesting item at the early of this particular run, and that was Maw of the Void. And Maw of the Void doesn't really work with Lilith, because Maw of the Void requires you to actually shoot, but because Lilith doesn't actually shoot, she's blindfolded, she shoots through her incubus, Maw of the Void just doesn't charge up, but yet I picked it up anyway. First of all, I think it's a damage up, so that's always a good idea on why you would pick Maw of the Void up, but also the other reason is it contributes to the Leviathan transformation. And because we already hit Brimstone, the mark I believe, and Maw of the Void at that point, I decided to pick it up to kind of increase my chances of getting the transformation, and because it does give you flight, that's also kind of an extra bonus, an avenue of getting more points for us, and of course just easier dodging all in all, just access to more consumables, and overall, you know, flight is just a great contributor to any good daily, just because it does allow you to kind of dodge a lot better and allow you to fly over chasms and things like that. So I never have anything bad to say about flight, and you probably see where I'm coming from in this case. But besides that, you know, I'm kind of running out of things to talk about in this run. It was quite straightforward in the sense that it was just a good run, you know, you get Brimstone, and when that happens, things usually turn out pretty well. I would say the only other contributor to our damage is, of course, our damage isn't naturally high, but with Brimstone, just because of how it works, it does get multiplied to some extent, but maybe even the bigger part of it is the Lump of Coal, and the Lump of Coal just synergizes so well with Brimstone. It gives you so much offensive potential, especially at the end of the beam. I'm not really sure how it works. I think the point of that is that the Lump of Coal gives you a base stat increase, I mean damage increase, depending on how far the tier has traveled. So let's say that if it travels 10 units, it gives you 2 damage. So for every 10 units, it would get 2 damage. That's maybe a bit arbitrary, but nevertheless. Because with Brimstone, you do get that flat damage modifier, you still get 2 damage, but because it deals 8 ticks of damage, essentially that means you're dealing 16 extra damage on top of that. I'm not really sure what the multipliers are, or maybe how much of damage it does add on top. I just know that it's a flat damage modifier because it does synergize really well with Soy Milk, and I think it has a very similar effect, but obviously with Brimstone it's even greater. Because Brimstone doesn't knock enemies back, and it essentially does allow you to get full hits of damage on the enemy without having to worry that you will miss any of them. But yeah, just combined Lump of Coal with Brimstone usually ends up in this super powerful run and allows you to essentially one-shot every boss that you come along. This kind of reminds me of a really broken synergy that existed in the original game, and that was Mom's Knife and Polyphemus. And even in this game it's still quite powerful, but I remember in the original game it was so powerful that essentially when you got it you would one-shot every single boss in the game, and it was uncontested. Just those 2 items, all admittedly quite rare, would just break the game in such a way that you would be able to win it without problem at all. It's one of those combinations, and I feel like Brimstone and Lump of Coal work similarly. Maybe it's not as powerful, but it's at least very fun to use, and there's really nothing more exciting than seeing that Brimstone kind of arch around you and then expand at the end and just dealing a huge amount of damage. One thing that maybe doesn't work so well on Lilith, even though it does synergize with a lot of items, Brimstone I mean, that it's still quite a narrow beam, and because it's narrow beam it's maybe a bit hard to hit enemies, and just because the Incubus lags behind, it's quite hard to hit sometimes. But then again, that's like cherry picking some mistakes or maybe some errors that don't really warrant it. I still think that it's obviously one of the best items that you can pick up, even on a character that can probably aim so well, just because you do have that Incubus. Nevertheless, this run was actually super decent. We did end up in a very, very comfortable spot. Exploration bonus was super high, our damage penalty was relatively low for Mega Satan. It could be lower, of course, but overall I would still say that this is one of the lowest damage penalties that I get for Mega Satan runs. And our score is 37, which is like top 30, and I think the last time I checked it, because I did play it in the morning and now I'm recording in the evening, I think I was like top 70 in Greedbot, and I do expect to go to like top 100, but I won't probably drop below that. So just the fact that even though my run was this good, which I would usually expect this to put me in like the top 20, just the fact that I'm in the top 100 is kind of telling that this was a really, really strong run. As always, the seed is in the descriptions and on the screen if you want to check it out after so in the end slate, after this part of the commentary is done, you can check the seed there if you don't want to go to the description, and you can play the seed for yourself. It was quite a fun one, and I definitely think it's one of those stronger Lilith seeds that's actually enjoyable to play. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.